I'm going to show you the crunch encounter between Sergei Karjakin and Magnus Carlsen from the penultimate round of the Shamkir Super Tournament. Remember, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, then do click on the button below. And if you want to support the channel, then do check out the links for PayPal and Patreon.com in the video description. Right, on with this game. Going into round 8, Karjakin was a half point behind Carlsen. So Karjakin knew that if he wanted to try and win the tournament, a draw probably wouldn't be good enough. He had to play for a win. So that's why we see him playing an open Sicilian and ready to take on Carlsen's newfound love of an opening, the Sveshnikov variation. Very interesting that here, instead of bishop g5, which really was the main line, or I think still is the main line, that Karjakin goes for this move knight d5 again, which Caruana played in the World Championship against Carlsen, and a few other opponents have played against him since. So this has to be taken, and now, well, earlier in the tournament we saw Carlsen play knight b8 against Navarre and won a beautiful endgame. Today Carlsen reverted to knight e7 that he played in the later games against Caruana, and also he played this in the Tata Steel tournament in January. So Karjakin playing these moves, of course, pretty quickly. He was clearly in his preparation. He had something up his sleeve, but all as previously seen so far. Here we've seen queen b8 before, but Carlsen went for bishop f5. And if Karjakin wants a draw, then he can have a draw here, because they're just repeating the position. But Karjakin showed his true colours here and went h4, which was played in the 12th game of the World Championship match in London. And there Caruana played bishop e3, but Carlsen actually got a very nice position out of the opening. But Karjakin pretty quickly played bishop g5, which is the computer approved move in this position. And Carlsen played queen b8 here. It's quite subtle. Queen d7 runs into... Well, queen d7 feels like a more natural move, but that runs into queen a5. And this is a little bit uncomfortable for black, actually. Threatening here. So queen b8 is a better move, with the idea that actually after queen a5, just that b6 stops the check, and then the bishop comes back, and actually black can straighten his pieces out in a better way there. So that's just one of the subtleties behind playing queen b8 to protect, well, keep maintaining protection of the d pawn, obviously. Moving out of the way of the bishop. So here Karjakin thought for around about 20 minutes over his next move, which I'm surprised about, given that he must have still been in his preparation. So the first sign of a little bit of doubt from Karjakin. The knight was pushed away and the queen popped out to c7, so just perhaps preparing to bring the rook in the game, but the queen is obviously better on c7 than b8. g3. So that is preparing castle's kingside, and then the h-pawn won't be on prise if the bishop is driven away. Bishop e7, and the bishop dropped back to e3. And e4 from Carlsen. So here is where things start to get pretty double-edged. So the pawn advances, making way for the knight to come to e5. Karjakin thought for 6 minutes and castled kingside. And this is a really interesting moment. Carlsen thought for 13.5 minutes here and sacrificed a pawn. Very, very brave. He could play knight e5 here, but I wonder whether he was concerned that he would somehow lose the initiative after c5. I don't think this is bad for black at all. But castles in this position is really interesting. So he just gives up this h-pawn. We saw him doing something similar in the Tata Steel tournament against Van Forest, and he won very quickly. So the knight comes into the middle and the bishop goes back. So what exactly does black have for this pawn? Well, it's actually all about time. The king is safe now, and it means that black can shift over towards white's king side, because in this position really white's best idea would be to put the pawn back on g2 and the pawn back on h2, and then white's king position would be pretty safe. But with the pawns advanced here, you can see there are holes all around white's king, and that makes life pretty problematic. So it could be the knight will come into f3, it could be we're looking at bishop g4, maybe bishop h3. There are also sometimes the possibility simply to take on h4 here, and it's rather dangerous, particularly with white's queen stuck across the other side of the board. And Karjakin tries to make amends for that and now plays queen a4. So queen exchange, obviously, with an extra pawn would be beneficial for white. So Carlsen just put the queen back on c8. So keeps the queen on this diagonal, keeps some pressure here as well. And now Karjakin went for it with c5. Very interesting move. So he's trying to sort of wrest back the initiative. I mean, I think if he just retreated the queen, I mean, the queen needs to come back, then, I mean, black seems to be absolutely fine after knight takes c4. So he goes c5. So, you know, Karjakin is up for a fight here. Pawn takes pawn. So now the fourth rank is cleared and knight takes pawn. And here black has a few different options. One could play b5 straight away, but c4 is really interesting, as Carlsen played. In a sense, it's very logical. If white's queen is very poorly placed on a4 at the side of the board, then why drive it to actually a better position? And c4 is a very useful move because, well, okay, first things first, it breaks the connection here in the middle, so that now bishop takes knight is threatened. But more than that, it gives black's knight a potential spot to jump into on d3. And b5 could be coming later anyway. And here queen c2 is a very odd move, a self-pin, but actually probably the best move. And then after rook e8, well, let me see, what's the score? Yeah, black is still a pawn down, but there is very nice compensation here. Ready to move this bishop out of the way, maybe just back to f8, sometimes even a sacrifice is possible. And as I said, these light squares around the king are so vulnerable, so weak, that it's a very pleasant position for black to play. So c4 just played, but here Karjakin played knight c3, and now things start to look very good for black. Carlsen guessed that Karjakin's whole idea with knight c3 was that he was perhaps anticipating that Carlsen would play for a draw with bishop d3. And here's the point, that after bishop takes bishop, black has a draw by perpetual check, like this. Not too difficult. Give the knight, and the queen comes in, and perpetual check on the G and H files. But by this stage, Carlsen was increasingly confident. He was ahead on time, and he invested, well, over 15 minutes here in just checking out the position, and played b5, setting up some rolling pawns on the queen side and driving that knight to the side of the board where it really doesn't look good. And then he got back into attacking the king side. So bishops come to e4, the queen would like to come to h3, and it's a pretty straightforward attack. I mean, black just has tremendous compensation for the pawn here. And to add to Karjakin's troubles, he was also pretty short on time. Carlsen playing pretty quickly and with a huge time advantage in this position, actually. From memory, it was actually over half an hour time advantage. It's an interesting move here, g4, to shut out the queen. But after simply queen c7, connecting the rooks, black has tremendous compensation. Queen d4, played by Karjakin, attacking two pieces, and they were both defended by queen f5. And here, I mean, white has various defenses. Probably f3 is the best defense, actually. And this gets extremely messy after, let's say, here and rook f1, pinning. I mean, black is better in this position, but it is extremely complicated. But the kind of thing that's extremely difficult to calculate when you're short of time, because you realise that one slip and you could just be gone. So you can't guess at these variations. Karjakin played f4. But this just makes white's king even more insecure. Now, after this move, g3 is terribly weak. Bishop came back to f2, and now knight d3. And yeah, still looking really unpleasant. I mean, given a couple of moves, then, well, this is on prise for a start. I mean, black also threatens just to bring the rooks into the game and smash through. It's a horrible position. I mean, one could take this knight, but it also doesn't help matters, because now black has this kind of extra bishop running around these light squares. Not a lot of fun. Not a lot of fun for white. h5 played. Queen f5. And now, again, really the only chance is to exchange. Black is better there. But Karjakin played bishop g4. Clearly, he wanted to get rid of that dangerous light-squared bishop. But it now means that this knight is secure on this amazing square. And Carlsen was very cool in this position. He didn't rush things. Bishop d6, nice move. So with potential threats here and basically just wanting to bring the rook over into the position. Queen step back, preemptive strike, or not a strike, but a preemptive retreat. And then rook e8. And you can see that this knight is what a beast. What a beast. Let's look at all the squares it's controlling and attacking. It's and defending that one as well. It's not a horse, it's an octopus with flailing tentacles menacing all around it. Just a beautiful piece. I mean, maybe the biggest problem is that white simply can't challenge on the e-file because that knight covers e1. Bishop d4 played, and now Carlsen, very cool indeed, just snapped off the pawn on h5. He didn't rush things and took, he spent 3 minutes over that move, making absolutely sure. No need to exchange queens. Just drop the queen back to g6. And then king h1 from Karjakin. He's lost now. He's completely lost. There simply is no defense. Rook e4, attacking the bishop, which dropped back to f2. And Carlsen simply doubled on the e file. And here, well, just before he lost on time, Karjakin resigned. He stopped the clock and shook hands. Well, let's just kind of clear a few things up. Does White have anything? No. I mean, there's just no sensible move here. So if let's make a random move, a3, over on this side of the board. So we could just take this. Now if rook takes f2, we can play rook e3 and then take here and crash through to the king. Or if queen takes f2, rook e2, and well, be careful if the queen moves. We've got queen h6 and queen h2, and if rook e1 is a bit desperate, let's give a check and play this one. And now rook takes queen really is a devastating threat, and that is the end of the game. Karjakin is completely lost. Wow. As Carlsen said after the game, it's been a lot of fun the last 2 days. Yeah, this game and his victory against Giri, just completely crushing, completely convincing. And, you know, interesting to see that Karjakin, when he had to play for a win, just couldn't get it right against Carlsen. But, you know, you have to question, what is he doing playing knight d5? It's all very well to prepare something, but you've got to get it right. And Carlsen said afterwards, people keep playing knight d5 against me, and I'm really happy to see it, as it leads to interesting chess. And he also mentioned that, you know, very often the computer thinks that White can be a bit better in these positions, but actually, as he said, chess is a practical game. And once you're out of preparation, it's about your feeling for the position, and also the stakes are very high. And if White gets it wrong, then he can be checkmated, as we saw in this game precisely. So that victory means that Carlsen wins the tournament with 1 round to spare. That is pretty unusual. He is, I think, 1.5 points clear of anyone else in the field going into the final round. So he's got a very pleasant final game. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.